Welcome back to Crenshaw StoryTime, The Chronicles of Ori by Harmonia Rosales. We are on Book 5 and Book 6. For Book 5, we're reading Chapter 19, Legacy. And for Book 6, we are reading Chapter 26, Ajaka. Chapter 19, Legacy. However far a stream flows, it doesn't forget its origins. Ghanaian proverb. In the ancient land of Okiara, where the Orisha Abatala reigned, a mysterious figure had emerged from the east. Adudawa, a man who wove tales of creation in the darkness, a cocoon that fed the Asokabus, lurking within every human soul. Adudawa united the 13 fractious communities of Abatalas which had fallen into conflict amid Abatala's descent into drunkenness. Adudawa forged them into the illustrations kingdom of Ifi. He chose one of the communities, Ifi, as his home and was crowned Uni, the spiritual ruler of Yorubaland. Under Adudawa's reign, Ifi blossomed. The people wisely shunned the perilous pathways of Bida, avoiding the call of the Isin Email and their Dawa, which had lured or forced many others into their spiritual kingdom. While some kingdoms faltered, seeking wealth and power through reckless raids that depleted their natural resources, and selling captured people down Bida's pathways. Those that remained loyal to the Orishas found renewed strength. Aji, the Orishas of wealth and trade, now free and part of the Orisha pantheon, safeguarded these fateful lands. She established thriving trade routes among kingdoms still within the Orisha's garden. Adudawa, with foresight and care, prepared both his son and his daughter to carry on his legacy. Arimian, the sole son of Adudawa's wife, Lakent, and the Orishas. Ogun, the god of iron and war, was a towering figure even in his youth, his physique a mirror image of his Orisha's fathers. Adudawa raised him as his own, and Orimian's true origins were kept secret, in the hopes that his fiery spirit could be tempted and his blood cooled by Adudawa's firm teachings of love and respect. For beneath Orimian's strength and beauty lay a restless Asokobo, a swirling vortex of high aspirations and unyielding desires. Orimian's heart pounded with the impatience of youth in search of independence. It throbbed with a hunger for power. He envisioned expanding Yorubaland into a great empire, with his own legacy surpassing even his father's demanding expectations. Akambi had the kind heart of her father. Adudawa, she was steeped in honor, a quality she wore like a second skin. She loved with the ferocity of a lion, a trait she received from her mother, Lekinj. Her love was as strong as her resilience, a calm, nurturing flame that burned brightly amid the cold winds of a trial and tribulation. In the years following the passing of Lekinj, Adudawa finally found peace. He continued his teachings beyond the borders of Ifi, reaching into the southern kingdom of Egypti Odi. Ejibu Odi, forgive me. There he formed a strategic alliance by marrying a royal woman of the kingdom, and together they had a son, Ogopogram. Solidifying his influence and reign, Adudawa felt a deep sense of accomplishment, realizing that kingship could be secured not only through might and conquest, as favored by Ogun, but also through diplomacy and alliances. Yet one night, the peace in Yorubaland was abruptly shattered by the thunderous arrival of an invading army of the Isinimil and their Dawa. They sought to dismantle Adudawa's power. Leading this dark tide was General Shahibu, a ruthless warrior tasked with eliminating the Uni. Adudawa's influence threatened the Isinemio's ambitions. His vision of unity and prosperity was a stark contrast to their desire for spiritual dominance, making him a target in their never-ending quest to expand control and seize resources. Adudawa awoke in the middle of that fateful night, stirred by a sense of unease. His foreboding was soon proven true by the far-off beating of hooves approaching. He urgently summoned Orimian and Akambi, declaring it their sacred duty to protect their people from the threat. The thumping of war drums filled the air and battle cries pierced the night. Adudawa, with unwavering valor, plunged into the fray. However, in the chaos of the battle, General Shahibu's blade found its mark, dropping Uni Adudawa to his knees. Witnessing his father's fall, Orimian felt the fiery wrath of a gun's blood surge through him. He charged toward the general, his movement swift and lethal, cutting down any who dared block his path. As Orimian reached Shahibu, the general prepared to deliver the final blow to the Adudawa, only to be met with the unstoppable force of a son's rage. Orimian confronted the general, engaging him in a fierce duel, each strike driven by vengeance. With unmatched skill, he overpowered the general, delivering a decisive blow that ended Shahibu's life. Kneeling beside his father, Orimian cradled Adudawa as he slowly bled out. In his final moments, Adudawa imparted a last piece of wisdom to Orimian. Lead with your heart. With those words, he passed. Grief-stricken Orimian experienced deep sorrow that turned into a relentless drive for revenge. The remaining invaders were vanquished, and the people of Ife were victorious. A son's tribute to the father he had lost. Uni Adudawa's death left a void in the kingdom of Ife. As he'd been both the spiritual and political leader, the loss ignited a fierce resolve in Akambi, who stepped into the former role, becoming the new Ayanili, the high priestess of Ife. She dedicated herself to upholding Adudawa's teaching that had first unified the kingdom. As days turned to nights, Akambi's commitment to her people and her devotion to spreading Adudawa's wisdom only grew stronger. Orimian assumed the mantle of political leadership, yet felt the unfillable void left by his father's passing. Unlike his sister, who embraced her sorrow, he hardened his heart due to the pain of losing his father, which isolated him from his sister and duties as Oba. His thoughts became ensnared in the Akunkan, the darkness that beckoned the Ajan warriors, awakening his Asokabo and casting a pallor over his Ori. He frequently visited the sacred burial site, his father's final resting place, seeking peace among the silent stones and soil, hoping to find solace in the solitude. He would search his mind, allowing his Ori to guide him, yet it wasn't his Ori that ultimately led him, but the Ajung that crafted an ambitious plan to conquer and reclaim East Kingdom in the land of Shinar, where Adudawa's own father had once ruled. Orimian raced back to Akambi, eager to share his plan. However, Akambi was firmly rooted in the soil of Ifi. She had discovered her purpose, and her Ori was clear. As she carried new life within her, a child from Aditi, a local chieftain's son. She told her brother that her purpose lay not in the pursuit of revenge, but in the promise of growth. In fostering unity and preserving their father's legacy by strengthening the kingdom, Akambi recognized the ferocity within Orimian and knew she could never quell the rage that drove him. Despite her fears that his quest might plunge the kingdom of Ifi into a cycle of violence, she respected her brother's decision. She promised to hold his place as Oba until his return, supporting his path while remaining steadfast in her own mission. This is a nice picture. I like this picture. It's beautiful. That's not the chapter I'm going to read though. Another nice picture. I like these. The artwork's amazing. Chapter 26, Ajaka. You learn how to cut down trees by cutting them down. African proverb. 5 years after Ajaka rose to power as the new emperor, or Alapin, he decreed that the empire's capital be his home kingdom of Katunga. This transition was made with the blessing of Ayaba Morimi, who endorsed Ajaka's decision on the sacred stipulation that Ifi remained the spiritual cradle of the Oyo Empire. Splitting the political from the religious not only reinforced Ajaka's rule, but also honored Morimi and the Orishas, ensuring their continued influence in the empire. The Oyo Empire was enjoying a period of peace, though there was an undercurrent of tension. Ajaka's diplomatic approach was a notable deviation from the militant policies of his father, Orimian. Ajaka believed in fostering harmony among the empire's various kingdoms rather than pitting them against one another. His reign was defined by an earnest pursuit of mutual respect within the empire and with the neighboring kingdom of Nupe, a vision his royal court found difficult to embrace. To some, Orimian's legacy seemed to be tarnished by the hands of Ajaka, who appeared weak in the eyes of those who valued strength above all else. Ajaka's dedication to peace inadvertently opened the door to nefarious actors. Abba Kosoko of Nupe, brother to Torisi and uncle to Ajaka, extended an invitation to the emperor to form a new trade agreement, trusting in the promise of lasting partnership between Nupe and Oyo. Ajaka accepted the offer. Ajaka crossed into Nupe territory to treat with his uncle and secure a prosperous future for both. However, upon his arrival, he was seized by his uncle's soldiers. This act was not only a personal betrayal, but a calculated move by Kosoko to undermine Ajaka's diplomatic efforts and assert his own dominance. He demanded a hefty ransom. Torusi, though aware of her brother's ambitions, had grossly misjudged him. Now war was coming. Torisi gave her approval to send a company of Katunga's soldiers, bearing the large ransom to the Nupe kingdom and retrieve her son. When General Timmy of Katunga returned as the sole survivor of the expedition, he encountered Tatarisi in the royal court of the Aflan Ajaka faced execution unless they stepped down. Timmy and his soldiers had been ambushed. They fought valiantly to reach Ajaka, but they were overpowered, many meeting their end before reaching Nupe soil. Their sacrifice and loyalty had not been enough to secure Ajaka's release. Obe Kasako, shrewd in his I was about to say in his evil negative tactics, but I gotta read what's written. About Kasako, shrewd in his tactics, spared Timmy to ensure that the news of Ajaka capture spread, and to remind people of Nupe's strength, aiming to sow fear within Katunga, to weaken the minds of its citizens before Nupe attempted to conquer them. He warned his sister Tarusi to leave for another part of the Oyo Empire, or he will forget their blood ties and she will meet her end. Faced with imminent danger, the royal court of Katunga, led by Tarusi, urgently retreated southward to the safety of the Igboho region. As they settled into their temporary haven, their minds turned to the pressing need to counter Kasoko's ambitions and defend their territory from further incursions. Determined to fortify their defenses, Teresi summoned her trusted generals, Timi and Gbono. She entrusted them within a mission to visit the palace of Glass and Storm and plead with her other son, Ajaka's half-brother. Tell him, his brother, and indeed the Oyo Empire are in great danger and need of his help, she instructed. At the center of the palace of Glass and Storm was a training arena. The open space seemed to hum with raw electricity. The ground of white sand shimmered under the perpetually gray skies that swirled above, while streams of the clearest water wove through the arena like the veins of life. This was no mortal place. It was a sacred ground. It was here that Shango, under the village and guidance of his father, Jakuda, had been relentlessly training, mastering both his godlike abilities and his mortal mind. The years of rigorous discipline had not only sharpened him, but had emboldened him with the powerful ashe that set him apart from humans. When Timmy and Gabona approached Dakota's fortress of Forgerite, the sight that greeted them was astonishing. Not even Teresi's description had prepared them. The fortress formed by lightning strike, sand could be nothing other than a domain of the divine. They approached the bastion with apprehension. When the generals first encountered Shango, they saw that he exuded power. Yet he greeted their urgent message regarding his brother Ajaka's grave situations with a lack of concern. His apathy was rooted in their history of rivalry and envy, and in their shared but divergent heritage. After Shango and Ajaka had their vicious argument, when Shango, in a moment of uncontrolled fury, left a scar on Ajaka's face with his electrical powers, the younger brother was scorned and cast out by his own mother. She refused to show him love and dispatched him to a harsh regimen of relentless training and sleepless nights, while his brother, relieved to have survived, basked in the privileges that came with royalty. Shango's envy was more than sibling rivalry. It reflected his desire to validate his own worth and step out from the shadow cast by his brother's lineage. Beneath his indifferent exterior was a turbulent inner struggle. Timmy and Gabono understood the significance of their mission and the potential consequences of failing to rally Shango to their cause. Despite his apathy, they impressed upon him that it wasn't just Ajaka at risk, but the entire leadership of the Oyo Empire. Jakuda, who had been listening intently from an academic chamber, entered the room and urged Shango to rise above personal grievances and rescue Ajaka. He empathized to Timmy and Gabono that the time had come for Shango to return to Oyo. Jakuda was confident that his son would wield the strength necessary to surpass Ajaka, thereby advancing the Orisha's own ambitions. Pulling Shango aside, Jakuda braced him with a few words of empowerment. Oyo will witness your evolution from a disgraced royal into a hero and warrior, embodying all the virtues of a future Aladdin. Jakuda said quietly, "Trust me, my son." Shango came to understand his father's plan for him. Before he set off his journey back to Oyo, Jakuda bestowed upon him a parting gift of a double-headed axe of exquisite craftsmanship. This weapon was imbued with the power to command lightning, making it a conduit of his powerful Ashe. It was a sacred artifact that could influence the skies above. With this powerful weapon in his lands, Shango embarked on his mission, flanked by Timmy and Gabono. It had been years since Shango had been in Oyo, but the generals did not take him to Katunga, for the great city-state had been conquered by Kosoko during their quest. As he passed through the gates of the main city in Igboho, Tarusi rushed toward him with open arms, enveloping him, hoping to fill the void of years without the immediacy of a mother's love. Yet, as she pulled back to look at him, a flicker of surprise crossed her face. The young man she had last seen had been replaced by a figure of imposing strength and quiet authority. She was proud of him, even as a subtle tremor of intimidation ran through her. Shango did not linger. He turned to the passing matter. Excuse me. He turned to the pressing matter of rescuing Ajaka and taking back to Katunga. With a sense of purpose in his every step, he moved to rally the combined forces of Ikuboho, and the remaining army of Katunga. Shango's presence commanded attention and respect. His transformation was not just physical. The aura of divine Ashe that enveloped him suggested depth and power beyond the understanding of ordinary mortals. As Shango and his troops drew near Katunga, they saw Nupe's military forces entrenching themselves within the city. They had raided many homes of ordinary people, spreading fear. Shango struck quickly, leading his troops into the city of his birth and driving out the Nupe soldiers, who quickly retreated toward their own territory. Shango and his men pursued them relentlessly, determined not to let them regroup. When they reached the border of the Nupe kingdom, the skies above churned. Dark, ominous clouds gathered, crackling with pent-up fury. Ahead lay the river of rivers, the natural barrier whose bridges were heavily fortified and manned by Nupe soldiers. Shango stepped onto the closest bridge with a confident stride, commanding the energy around him. The very air around him buzzed, charged with anticipation of the impending confrontation. His double-headed axe shot streams of light outward while bolts of lightning descended from the sky, striking down the guards on the bridge one by one. As Shango and his army surged forth, the Nupe soldiers braced themselves for the clash. Yet, Nothing could have prepared them for this foe. The encounter was swift, like a flash storm that leaves devastation in its wake. Nupe's warriors, though courageous, found themselves outmatched by the powerful Ashe unleashed upon them. Lightning struck those who dared stand in defiance, while others, witnessing the fall of their comrades, laid down their weapons in surrender. In moments, the battlefield fell silent, broken only by the crackling fires of the lightning that had started, and distant and rumble of thunder within an army at his back, and whirling clouds accompanying him above. Shango pressed forward, his eyes set on the palace of the Nupe kingdom. It was there, in the innocent sanctum of Nupe's palace, that he found his brother Ajaka. Held captive by Kosoko and underestimating Katunga's power, the devious Oba had only succeeded in its strengthening it. Shango quickly slew the Oba Kosoko, who had spent his last moment watching his army be subdued. Ajaka, now free, stood before Shango as their memories of both rivalry and admiration hung in the air. In the stillness of their reunion, the brothers each saw in their other a reflection of the person they secretly yearned to be. In the aftermath of the brief war, as peace settled over the land once again, the kingdom of Nupe found itself under new stewardship. Word of Shango's defeat of the Nupe and rescue of Ajaka spread rapidly across Katunga throughout the Oyo Empire. The many accounts of the battle varied in accuracy, but all spoke of how Shango had wielded the elements themselves to vanquish the enemy and secure his brother's freedom. These stories were recounted with awe and fervor. The royal court, which had already been critical of Ajaka's diplomatic and pacifist approach to the kingdom's neighbors, was insistent in the wake of Shango's actions. The courtiers now saw Ajaka's avoidance of the conflict as a vulnerability that had nearly cost them their empire and their lives. In contrast, Shango's decisive intervention was seen as an augur of a grand future. The court envisioned the potential for greater dominance over the empire's neighbors, under the guidance of a ruler with the capability to harness both martial and supernatural might. The warriors who fought alongside Shango were loyal to him, further solidifying his claim to leadership. Shango was either going to be given the throne or he was going to take it. In a decisive vote, the court chose Shango as the new Alaphin, portraying his strength as essential to the empire's future. Ajaka found himself demoted by the empire he had sought to protect through peace and that had been granted to him by his father, Harmonia. In the spiritual realm, Shango's rise to power saw his own father, Orisha's Jokuda, return to Eden. The coronation of Shango was met with widespread jubilation throughout the empire. Obas from every corner of Oyo gathered and lifted their voices into a chorus of celebration and anticipation. Laid bare his vision for conquering distant lands, Jokuda listened intently, his expression unreadable. He understood Shango's aspirations, for he too had harbored ambitions that stretched beyond his current standing in Eden. Jokuda had not yet regained his place on the Council of Orishas. Over the years, Jokuda had imparted all his wisdom to Shango, mediciously, grooming him for leadership. With nothing left to teach Jokuda, he felt a void, unsure that more he could offer. Yet he wanted to aid Shango's ambitions. If his son were able to create the most powerful empire in human history, surely he, Jokuda, would be welcomed back on the council. With a rumbling sigh, Jokuda finally spoke, revealing a truth that would transform Shango's destiny. Acknowledging the dangers, the father advised the son to seek Akinju, the Orisha who could bestow the power to infernal flames. This element alone could forge iron into weapons or reduce it into nothing. And Akinju was none other than Shango's grandfather. This stunned Shango. The power he sought lay within his own bloodline. Jakuta's counsel came with a warning. However, the kingdom that was Ajunga's, no, Agangju's, forgive me, the kingdom that was Agangju's, where the earth itself bled heat and mountains spat flames, was no place for a mortal. It was a domain where only those who were direct descendants of Orisha could dare to tread. Jakuta knew the trials that awaited Shango, for the gift of fire was not given lightly. It demanded and able a sacrifice. His warning was intended not to dissuade Shango, but to steal his son for what might be asked of him. Deep within Jakuta knew that Shango, endowed with his own blood and unbreakable spirit, could grasp a level of power previously beyond the reach of any mortal. Shango thanked his father and set forth toward the fiery lands of his grandfather's kingdom. Agenju's kingdom was one of overwhelming energy, a place where the flames danced with life of their own, and the very air suffocated foolish mortals with heat. The ground was an abstraction of molten rock and ash that thrummed with the beat of the earth's core. As Shango crossed the threshold into the volcano where he will find Agenju, the flames crackled around him, obscuring his views and disorientating him. Thank you. Happy holidays. Have a wonderful day.